now.
I the little ones.
Oh, yeah.
Very small. I should have been going. Go back. Watch recording this. Then we like that.
Did Bob confirm he'd be here?
He was in yesterday and indicated he would be here.
I saw him this morning and we talked about
Great.
the meeting, so.
Not exhausted from last night. I still be
It was a late
sleeping.
night.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, you saw him this morning, at least he made it up.
You maybe never went to bed.
True.
Yeah.
He still has a minute and a half ish before he's late.
You remember Kathy out of town?
I haven't heard from Kathy. Krista McDonald said she won't be able to make it. And this would have been her last meeting before she's moving out of town. So
Was she ready to move?
she's ready to move,
I
apparently.
drive by her construction site and wow, it just looks nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't
It
it?
looked very,
Where,
well, from where it started.
Oh, yeah.
where is she going again? Where's her house?
Out of town, just had, you know where the Keller clan lives, the whole assemblage of the Keller family.
Yeah, I know. I think, I
Oh, yeah.
think he's working on it. Yeah, I sent an email sometime early afternoon. Let's see.
I don't know this is, but the minimum.
Green areas are very.
So anyway, we have just, the girl, that found something, what?
Yeah, they've done something online. But it'll be fun.
So.
It's a teaser.
Just have her send me a text. Still walking down there.
Well, and now I'm beginning to think about the Christmas. But was already in my whole design. I used to do everything along the trees. The trees are all. But now we have that big open space, so I can move things where there was needed, you know.
Get a couple steaks.
Oh, I have, they had it all figured out. There's new wood.
Now you have a kid.
Now I have to rejigger things.
I have the kids and John and Kathy to the decorating.
That's the main motivation. Brian really likes Christmas.
No. It's actually, construction is square. She works like that.
And we do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum, yeah. Usually what we do if we have a situation where we don't have a full board is we'll have the meeting anyway. We can do the minutes from the last one. And we still offer to the applicant that they can proceed tonight if they would like, or they can postpone to the next meeting.
Yes.
In hopes that we would have a full board. And I'll explain that.
There he is. Wait a minute. Let's not generalize.
All right.
Yeah.
I nearly sit down and close my eyes.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
I wouldn't be here at all. I had jumped out with a bookcase.
Good catch, good catch.
Yeah.
Cats are smart. Great.
So let's call the meeting to order and I'll take roll. Kim Morris.
Here.
Sue Stewart.
Here.
John Leo.
Here.
Bob Thoma.
Here.
Matty Hines.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Krista McDonald, the chair, isn't here today. So we'll need to elect a temporary chair for the meeting tonight.
We'll also have to have
And-
Sue serve as, she's an alternate, so
Oh,
she'll serve as.
Yeah. So who would like to be the chair for tonight? And it can be anybody other than John, no offense, John.
No, I know he can't.
I said
I'm okay with
it
that.
last time, so I'm gonna nominate Bob.
Okay.
A second. Since he's freshly rested and all.
He is, he just took it in.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Bob, the meeting is yours.
Just so you know, I used to laugh at those old people who took naps. Now I is one. Okay. So we bring this order of the zoning board of appeals to order. And, okay, yeah, I don't have any paperwork, I'm sorry. Okay,
Minutes.
approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody?
I read through them and they looked accurate to me. So I, barring any comments, I'd make a motion to approve.
Second? Patty? Yeah. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, so we have public comment and correspondence on this issue on the bluff. Public comment?
Is it time for me to go?
It could be.
Well,
If you don't mind, Bob,
Yes.
I'll introduce this. I want to make
please.
a couple comments on it, not to cut you off,
No,
but I will hand it over to Dan here in a second. Would you pull up the page from his application that shows the site plan? This page, please.
The one with the.
Yes. We can rotate that.
ZBA 3.
CBA 3, yes. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One thing that I wanted to point out is on the notice that we put in the paper, initially Dan had submitted a site plan that had a slightly larger structure. And through discussion of reasonable alternatives, he revised the plan and added some more on the second floor and shrunk in the setbacks. So where the notice says that they were going to be 11 feet away from the front property line, they're now 15 feet away. So it's less of an ask. Also, where before they were going to be 20 feet away from the rear property line, they're now 24 feet away. So because their request is less than what was put in the notice in the paper, we're still okay to proceed with the meeting tonight. The other thing I wanted to point out is on the south side of the property here, we have the edge of the bluff. And this line right here represents the top of the bluff where we've recognized the grade of the property there is too steep for anybody to build on. And that creates this restricted bluff zone that they've shown on here. And any structure that's built within that restricted bluff zone also requires planning commission to review the site plan as opposed to me reviewing it administratively. That way they can demonstrate with the planning commission that they're making the necessary steps to maintain the stability of the bluff and that they're not going to cause any damage. So they've noted that on here. That will be something that the planning commission will discuss as part of their review to make sure that that's okay. It does require, because they're asking for a variance, that they come here first in regards to their request for what's shown here in green as the rear yard variance and then the front yard variance there. And that's basically what I have to start this because I knew there were some questions about that. And I'll hand it over to Dan to explain what they want to do and why.
All right, hi, I'm Dan Gorman, Gorman Design. This is Barbara Latham and Laura and the Krieger. They're the clients for the house. They will be sharing it together. And Barb, you're moving to Pine Street because?
Well, because as you can see, I have some issues and I'm living way out on Lower Shore Drive. And I don't want to have to drive into town. It's just, especially at night, it's not as good. And also I need a garage because in the winter, I'm afraid of falling. So this is really for that purpose. And my daughter's going to be taking care of me. But, I just need to be in town with a garage. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So they came to me, so they found this property, which is beautiful. There's an existing residence on it right now that I believe someone is going to move off the site and relocate. I think there's some electrical things that have to be worked out, Jeff, or something like that to do it. Are you familiar with that?
I think we're meeting with them actually tomorrow for
Okay.
discussions of what can be done there.
So we actually get to save one of these things instead of crunching it and throwing it away, which is always a bonus to be able to do that. So one of the other things like Jeff said, we submitted a larger plan. And when in conversation, it was like, okay, it seemed a little bit too big. What can we do? And that's when Barb said, well, we wanted to put her master suite on the first floor just to keep things convenient. And then she said, what if we do an elevator? And that made a world change because then we condensed the whole house. We went from a 40% lot coverage to 36% lot coverage. So we found that is there an alternative means to do something? So we got to check the box on that. And we also at one time we were up around 4,000 square feet and that dropped down to 3,173. So we did take some reduction. The other thing we've done too is that there's always concerns about bluff view and everything like that. And I understand that a lot of the bluff view, as long as we can maintain corridor views. So we're on a 10-foot setback line, which is required by zoning. And then even on the west side, we've gone a little bit farther and bumped it back another 1.5 feet, so we're 11.5 feet. So we were concerned about the park. We've heard a lot about that. It's a beautiful park that people like. So we're maintaining that opening. And even if you look at the existing structure, it still comes out far beyond this. As Jeff mentioned, the restricted bluff zone, one of the requirements was to achieve, we have to consult with, we consulted with Benchmark, their engineer. Brian Nolan, and he's done a report on this and has already submitted that he didn't see any problem with it, but also that needs to be verified by another engineer just to make certain of it. So we've taken care of that. Let's see, what else? Yeah, keeping our view, we decreased that. On the roof design too, we've kept the slope of the existing house run east-west, and ours also runs in an east-west, which keeps a lot of bulk of the height of the roof up in the center of the house. Again, try to keep that open filling to keep that view open. Let's see, what else have we done here? View corridor. And that's about all I have. You can see the elevations, height wise, we're at 34 foot. Again, zoning requires 35 feet. Our other challenge with this lot too, in a R1B zoning, the minimum lot size, I think it's on the site, it's 8,000 square feet. And we have 6,600 square feet on this. So this lot that we're working at is 66 by 100, which is extremely small for an R1B zoning. So we've done our best, and on the elevations, the areas in the green, can you go to the side elevation? I think this is the next one. These are basically the area. This is the rear of the house or the south side. That's the area requiring a variance. As of this small part of it. So you can see our variances requests are just at the front and back. So we've maintained the narrowness again to keep a nice view and open. And we had to push to the road a little bit side because of our restricted zone. So that was our second proposal, and we felt pretty good with it. And if you have any questions, my best answer.
Is the concern with the protected area, the actual structure or the process of building the house?
It's a process of building the house and the stabilization of the embankment there.
Right.
And
Because this goes, the new proposed structure doesn't go outside of where the existing structure is in.
there's a little corner that it does, but one of the bonuses here is that, yeah, let's see here. Here we go. The covered porch right here, because this line indicates the existing foundation of the house, which has to be removed. So we'll do that. So we're picking up a little corner right here that we're gonna add into, but more importantly, all that we have out here is a post. It's just a sonotube that we'll set a column on to create this covered porch. And the other bonus too, this covered porch is column and railings, which helps keep that openness too of looking through the house and view.
The restricted bluff zone came into play in the late 90s, early 2000s. We didn't have these restrictions, and there were some homes primarily along the bluff farther up in like Friendship and Redmond Township, where they built in real close proximity to that bluff. And they had issues where I don't think homes completely fell down the bluff, but there was damage to some properties.
I get it.
And so they put these things in place to preserve the stability of the bluff, to make sure that a home built too close to the bluff wouldn't be damaged, or work being done on a home wouldn't accidentally damage other nearby properties, to make sure that those are done. And so Benchmark has provided a review of that stability and what work will be done to maintain it. And we're having Beckett Rader and John Angeli review that to make sure that it's going to be sufficient.
Thank you. By the way, thank you for the way you've created your views, the green highlight.
Yeah.
It makes it so easy to figure out what's going on.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you brought that up at last.
Fantastic.
I think Sue, you mentioned something about it over here. So that was like, it's always hard to let you bring color in. It's hard to explain.
Yeah. No, well done. Thank you.
Dan, so you're legally able to get out on that slope and put piers?
Yeah,
That's okay.
Yeah, that's what the letter that, I don't know, can I show him a copy of what Brian, or should that?
If you have, I don't have a copy, but you have a copy, yeah.
Yeah, this is what he had to provide for us. He does a recommendation and he bases it on the sections that are involved and
I
everything
was
like
just
that.
curious if we were getting out into somebody else's territory here.
The planning commission will review that and make sure that it's going to be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll meet again.
If I should backtrack a little. if they receive approval for a variance, they will move on to that phase. I don't want to make an assumption there, sorry.
Do we have some public comment here?
But why don't we have a motion to open public?
Oh, all right.
I would move to open the public comment.
Second,
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's move into the public comment. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm a little rusty on this. Public comment?
Yeah.
Anybody, please?
Pam Torchinsky, 465 State Street. So I ride my bike past that house every day for like the last 10 years, that property. And I walked it a couple of times since the change of ownership and the proposal for this new construction has been put forward. So I was on it this morning, and the things that struck me are these. Even with the current change setbacks, I live on State Street. Lucas's men drive those snow plows past in January, and they throw that snow intentionally or unintentionally. It's northern Michigan, 15 feet right up to my house. And the house here is going to be built about as close as mine is to the road. I would not be surprised to see snow from Lucas's plows going right into the front of that building. That's fine. The other thing is, when I look at the back of that property, there's already erosion going on back in there, and how that would ever be dealt with, even if it was just being dealt with as an erosion problem, I sure don't know. And they're suggesting to overhang a building heavy weight over that erosion. I don't see it. The other thing that really worries me is, what does this house look like? In the pictures, it looks massive. It looks like a McMansion, and it looks like it's way outside for the space. There's tiny little houses in there next to it that are going to be swamped. There are big houses across the street, but they're older, and the scale of those is beautiful. When you look at that space from Main Street, so look with me on Main Street, you're going to see this big white sore thumb sticking up there, overhanging that block. So in terms of what's there, fitting into the neighborhood, taking care of the environment, nothing that's presented here suggests to me that that's been considered. And all across America these days, houses are being considered according to their environmental impact, their neighborhood impact. For elderly residents, such as the future owner here, they're looking at houses that are built on one floor, not multiple floors. This just does not seem to me at all like a modern, forward-thinking, environmentally caring structure. So I think at the very least, it should be kept within the legal current existing guidelines, orders. And I think the property itself, does that look like a property that an elderly person can live in safely? Is that building really being built for the health welfare of this resident? And is that building, just the weight of it, going to complement that Darlingborough house that's next to it, the older houses that are across the street that again are large, but the scale is human, and none of this is. This is all McMansion, trophy, and it doesn't have any features that look like Harbor Springs. That house could be anywhere. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, so should we make a motion to close?
We should.
We did receive 4 pieces of correspondence that were in the packet. And then I passed out one right before the meeting that was received after the packet was sent out. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read that, but we have that as well.
So I would make a motion to close the
Yeah.
public hearing.
Please. Motion?
Can I say something?
Please.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I
Please.
just wanna, I hear you 100%, 100%. I come from the world of McMansions, Southern California, where we have Bigfoot disease and where everybody maxes out their property. And we are not those people. And what you see, I promise you, it is not going to be a McMansion. I am vehemently against McMansion, and I have chosen the dream team and have been able to retain Dan Gorman and Dick Colley for the reason that we will keep the integrity of Harbor Springs. In fact, if you come to our meetings, we in detailed ways pull houses from Wheatley and other and downtown and put together some ideas that really make it very, very Harbor Springs. My mother and I are diehard Harbor Springs lovers of every part of the community, the culture, and the architecture, which is why we chose Dan. And if I could just promise you, if you knew us, you will know that we are nothing but we love small, cute homes. It is going to have such cuteness and it's not going to be what you feel like it is when you look at the picture. I can promise you that. And Dick's don't have the houses here. I promise you. This is going to be such a beautiful addition. And we tried very hard to do everything we could with the existing home to make my mom live safe and careful, but there were steps and there's no potential for a garage in the potential in the
elevator.
Right, in the existing home, and that's why we're, gonna do the elevator for her and to shrink it down because nobody is anti Bigfoot the way I am. And I just want to say we hear everybody and we're a neighborhood. We want a happy neighbor.
And the whiteness, it may not be.
Oh,
white.
yeah. And it's not going to be a big white house, but it's going to fit in aesthetically with the rest of Harbor Springs. That we can promise you.
Thank you.
The end. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay,
So we had a motion
We have a
from
motion,
John
Roll.
to close the public hearing. Do we had a second? You want
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So. Board members, questions, statements, concerns?
When the proposal states that this house will not be any closer to the street than the neighboring house, which I presume is the one on the corner of Hoyt and Pine, is that based on the original location or the current? You revised it.
Yeah, the foreign use who owned the corner house, we had a variance to, add to the front of their house. And it was 11 foot 6 dimension. That's what we started with and we brought it back to 15 feet.
So there's
The addition of the elevator helped us crunch that north south.
So when you come down Pine Street, that first house is closer to the street than this
That is
house
correct.
is going to be.
That is correct.
Sue, if you look at ZBA page 2,
That's what I'm looking at.
it shows
I was trying to measure it with my pinky, but I thought
it's nice.
But-
It shows when we get to the portion of the discussion for reasonable use. I think it shows some of the homes in the neighborhood so that you have an idea of comparison of what they're proposing.
You okay?
Mhm, yes, that answers your question. Thank you.
Anybody else?
No. No,
Okay.
no.
Well, then let's close that up and deliberate on this. Any talk between us? I don't have any concerns. Anybody else have concerns here?
I don't have any concerns, and in fact, through the process that they've gone through, they've already modified the design to decrease the ask, the variances that they're asking for. I think there's certainly goodwill there to minimize the impact, the adverse impact, and the need for a variance. I think that.
And, and I looking at that bluff in the front of it and thinking about erosion, that is something that I think about there, but the best, my amateur opinion on this, please, it's an amateur opinion, is that for the city to get back into replanting some on that bluff in the city park is as important as anything. I think there's a lot, that park down there lost a lot of trees through the establishment of the Shea Drain, and a lot of those trees have aged. I live across the street. I live very close to where you're building. And looking across there at those trees, those trees need some help. That part, if that's going to be an area with nice trees that stabilize the bluff, at some point, there have got to be new trees put in there. That isn't this property's burden to bear. And if the engineering report has come back that this is not an issue for the bluff, then I don't have an issue with that.
So to that point, is erosion something that these engineering studies are addressing?
That will be part of the discussion at the planning commission. They will review that.
What alternatives does the planning commission have through that discussion?
Well, the planning commission, obviously they're looking at a site plan review, so they'll be reviewing, one, does it meet all of the zoning requirements? Obviously, part of that will be taking into consideration if a variance is granted by the ZBA. But then specifically, there's the language of why it goes to the planning commission to review based on the stability of the bluff and the safety, making sure that, one, that what's proposed to be constructed will be safe, and then also that the methods that they use to do the work proper procedures will be taken into consideration to make sure that they don't do anything to damage the bluff more.
May I say something about that?
That's up to Bob.
May I say?
Yes, please.
One of the things we're planning on doing is planning on planting some plants on the edge and as it, of our property and towards the water, that direction, to help preserve the bluff. And there are certain kinds of plants, which I don't know what they are right now, but the landscaper I've talked to said he could recommend some things for us to strengthen the bluff. And so that's what we will be doing through the landscaping situation.
The question for you, should the bluff begin to deteriorate in some of these areas, whose responsibility will that be? Ours, theirs?
It depends on who owns it, doesn't it?
Well, yes, I think partially it depends on who owns it. How the damage was caused, if it was specifically damage or natural erosion. But I guess I don't really have a great answer for you. I can find out.
Bob, are you suggesting that if this is approved by the city, does the city have some responsibility?
That's what I'm wondering, how this all lines
No, the
up.
city wouldn't have, we don't have responsibility for what happens on a property if we, just because we approve a plan. We just say that it meets our zoning code or it meets our codes or it doesn't meet our code. But if something would destabilize on that bluff, that would be if this on their property, that would be their problem. However, I think it would be prudent at that time or even in advance for the city to look at its regulations to try to prevent that, because that's our goal. Our goal is to try to protect the health and safety and welfare of the public. So.
And that's the objective of the engineering studies that will be addressed at the planning commission to ensure that no damage is done and that we don't make it worse and if possible make it better with plantings, landscaping that'll be on the back end of the house. I mean, if there's a larger issue, that sounds more like a tree board.
Yeah.
The city should get into that one.
Well, see, it says remove existing tree, but leave the stump. That's not gonna do any good because the stump will rot over time. So.
Well,
Yeah.
and forgive me, Victor, if I get this wrong, but I think it was a year or two ago, Ben Veiling, which is our arborist, was in talking with city council. And my understanding from the conversation that he had was that trees and the root system for trees are good for the deep soil underneath, but for erosion issues, they actually make it worse because the tree coverage prevents grass from going. And so the topsoil can actually be washed away. So what's better for erosion control is like tall grasses and things like that, because that heavy dense root system is at the surface of the soil and prevents that from washing away. So by removing the tree and allowing grass to grow, it might actually
Given
help
more
with that.
stability.
Yeah, there,
And if I've got that wrong, Victor, I.
it's, I think it's
That's what I
for the
remember.
for the most part, I think what Ben was trying to get at, this is probably going off topic what the zoning board needs to address, but it's really that, you can't have the habitat tilted heavily one way or another. You need to have that diversity of trees and vegetation there. You can't just have one type of vegetation, tall trees or small trees, or just, you need a variety there. I think that's what I was getting at. So, but I think that is veering off ZBA's review here.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't realize there were people on Zoom watching this. Do they have any, I can reopen that. Do they have any questions or comments?
Usually they'll raise their hand if they do. So if you do have a comment,
Okay,
Doesn't look
I
like
don't
we've
see
got
any.
anybody.
you said they do have a comment?
no, I don't see any.
Oh,
Doesn't look like they do.
Thank you.
What, can I just say one more thing? You mentioned the grasses, the landscaper I spoke with said that, he recommended grasses, certain kinds of grasses. I don't know what kind they are. But he said it does a very good job of preventing erosion. In fact, we'd be doing a service for the little park, which the city is in charge of, because if we keep our piece of property from eroding through planting the grasses, that might help the city park. So we would hopefully be doing you a service.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Can you all
Oh,
hear
we
me?
have somebody online.
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is Frank Wiley. We're the owners across the street at 683 Pine. And so we, right now we enjoy a nice view. Obviously, this will change that view pretty dramatically. So just kind of that's would be our only concern at this point in time. We're always happy to have new neighbors, and certainly it's their property, and we want them to be happy with what they put there. But it is a concern of ours.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, we have more discussion here, or do we want to go to a vote?
I got my questions answered, I think.
Before you go to a vote, I'd just
Okay.
like to make sure that we cover some of the concerns, topics that we need to cover for the basis of our decision. And that's that we identify a practical difficulty, which would be, I think, at minimum 3 parts. We do have the decision matrix that goes into more detail if you'd like to use that. But we should at minimum cover that there's some, if you're in line to grant a variance, that you identify that there's some unique instance about the property itself that creates a practical difficulty. The second part would be that they're asking for a reasonable use comparative to their neighbors and what they want to do with the property. And lastly, that there is or is not a reasonable alternative that would require less of a variance than what they're asking for. And if you'd like to go through the decision matrix to identify that, you could, or you could just do it through discussion.
Okay, how about if we do this, do the findings of fact and I read it and then we talk about them real quick, we check them off. So the first one is based on the following evidence, which is part of the record. The board finds that there are or are not unique characteristics of the subject land and not the general characteristics of the surrounding area. So is this unique?
I think it is. It's looking at this right here, and you can kind of see the surrounding lot sizes. It's definitely a smaller lot.
When in
Compared
fact,
to
it
the
doesn't
others.
meet the minimum lot size for the area that it's on. It's shy by what, 2,000 feet? So there is.
Now, Jeff, is that part, we're not voting on that. Correct?
No, you can come to a consensus. You can just, provide your reasons why you then choose to vote. If going through this findings of fact you determine that, that there are sufficient reasons. Like that was a thought that Kim had. If you all share that same thought, then that's a consensus. But basically going through this and using this to come to a reason of why you then make a motion that you make.
So one of the points of evidence is it's a smaller lot. Another point of evidence is that it's smaller than the minimum for that zoning district. Is that the idea here?
That would be, I think, a real good example.
Okay, so this, we agree that this, there are unique characteristics.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, if they are, we'll go to the next one. Based on the following evidence, which is part of the record, the board finds or does not find that strict application of the zoning code to the applicant's property would be unfair or produce an unjust result because.
Well, that would be the same thing over again.
Yeah, same,
Basically.
yeah.
So we do find that the strict application would be unfair. 3, based on the following evidence, which is part of the record, the board finds or does not find that strict compliance with the code would prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose or would render conformity with the zoning code's restrictions unnecessarily burdensome. Yes, no,
It's kind of the same one.
Yeah, I think it reiterates.
Yeah.
This switch is more, I guess, from the property itself to getting into that reasonable use discussion. So, would prevent the owner from using the property for permitted use. And using the property is in reference to similar uses of the neighbors. So an example of an unreasonable ask would be if all of the neighbors in a subdivision have 8-foot front porches and you have somebody coming in asking for a 15-foot front porch, that's not reasonable use. Reasonable use would be a similar porch what the neighbors have.
And it's relative to the neighbors.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. A reasonable, like for sizes of homes, if somebody wanted to build a 15,000 square foot home, that would probably not be very reasonable on Lake Street. That would be tremendous in size in comparison to the surrounding homes. But that size of a home might be very typical on Glen Drive or Weequahic. So it's always in comparison with the neighborhood of where the property is located.
Well, it's definitely within reason for most of those homes. There are a couple of smaller homes, but they don't necessarily have to be smaller. They're not filling their footprint. I think it's probably the 686 and 680, 684 and 686 are definitely smaller homes, but they don't have to be smaller homes just because they're smaller homes. There doesn't mean
And if this
the
view,
rest of the neighborhood is
I agree.
similar to this one.
If you zoom out just a little bit and you pick up a couple more houses in that area,
Yeah.
I think it would be more comparable than the
Definitely
two
comparable.
houses that are next to it, headed towards Point.
It's interesting too, the way you build without, one of the ways you build without needing a variance is to take the existing non-conforming structure and build exactly where that existing structure was. And that would be a worse situation here in terms of where it has the house sitting in relation to the bluff zone and the lot. It would be an odder. I think in some ways this takes what was a very non-conforming house on that lot and makes it look more like the rest of the neighborhood. That's what we're going
I
for.
agree.
So it sounds like I heard that finds that their strict compliance would prevent,
Right.
and then we had some reasons there. Is that a consensus?
Yep.
Okay. 4, based on the following evidence, which is part of the record, the board finds or does not find that there are no reasonable alternatives to granting a variance. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, the specific evidence might include.
All of the points that we've listed so far, is that how we do reiterate the same points?
Yeah.
Or
Well, technically, in my mind, they've already done an iteration on the design based on the feedback that, I mean, they've reduced the ask already by
Yes.
redesigning it. So they've tried
That's-
to, they've already tried to address that.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's a very reason, I believe, a very reasonably sized home. They can't be built without variances to extend into the front and back, setbacks.
Okay,
Okay,
that's,
everybody agree with that?
yeah.
Okay. 5, based on the following evidence, which is part of the record, we do find or we do not find that the variance could be granted without substantial injury to property and the neighborhood in which the property is located.
Just refined.
I agree with that.
What would be an example of injury to the surrounding neighborhood? Just something that is visually out of place, where the
Yes.
form is really different, or?
Water runoff, noise, excessive light.
Let's say that view was important in the neighborhood
Mhm.
and all of the homes that were there were limiting themselves to the 35-foot height requirement. And you had a specific lot that was too small. And they said, in order for us to get the same use of our neighbors, we want to go 4 stories high.
Got it, yeah.
That would impact substantially the views of other properties in the area, and would be a particular issue. And obviously that's a variance request to go up in height.
Mhm.
And so that might be a way that other properties might negatively be impacted,
Mhm.
in a way.
Okay,
And there's probably others, but that's a simple one I think that comes to mind, but.
great, okay.
I have one quick question for Dan. Dan, these 8-foot or 9-foot ceilings?
On the first floor, they're 10. Yeah, and then we're 8.5 on the second. Floor. So instead of doing 9.5 and 8 or something, we kind of juggled the two around.
But we're still, the overall height is 34, right?
34 feet. So we're still underneath the 35-foot requirement.
Mhm.
Okay. 6, based on the following evidence, the board finds or does not find that any practical difficulty was self-created. That word, practical difficulty, I love it.
So we did have a consensus on 5 that we did not, or the board did not feel that there was a substantial injury to neighboring properties.
Agreed.
And the situation is certainly not self-created.
That's we've gone through that before here.
Self-created is an interesting one.
Exactly.
Let's say that I am the property owner and I created this small lot through a split. I've created that small size lot. So I've created the problem and then I'm coming in asking for a variance because of the small lot. Well, that's not right.
Created.
Let's say the property owner was building a home and they had the choice of whether or not to include a garage and they chose not to. And then 5 years later, they realized they didn't build a garage in Northern Michigan. Now they want a garage and they come back asking for a variance to get that garage. That would be a self-created issue. They chose not to leave room for that garage. However, the self-created issue goes away. Let's say that property owner sells that home and buys another one, and the new property owner comes in and says, I need a garage. It's no longer a self-created issue anymore. So that's, yeah.
It's a good example.
Well, once again, years ago, we went through this. And okay, so we want to build a bigger house than we can. That's self-created. In a word, that's not an act of nature. That's not an act of God. We want to put 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound sack.
That gets back to the reasonable use discussion
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not pushing that, but
Mhm.
I'm always curious because we move back and forth with this.
and it seems like the reason that logic doesn't hold is just because what you're trying to do is conform to the rest of the neighborhood, to make the house So the house that goes there is supposed to be kind of like what's around it. And even though there are age differences on the two different sides of Pine Street, it's still, they're still similar structures. Right?
Another, good example of self-creation is, if the lot is shaped a certain way, maybe has like 7 different sides, or if there's some natural features about the lot that they have to, for example, there's a river that runs through it, right? And, they have to adjust their setbacks or get variances because there's a river right in the middle of their property. So natural features can be also something that's not self-created. Just as an example of what's not self-created.
Like the bluff.
Like the restricted area that they can't go into. Yes.
So do you feel that this is a self-created issue or not?
No.
I do not.
No, I don't. Especially seeing as how they bought it and the house is going to be moved. We're not tearing something down and,
Well,
you know what I mean?
We don't know that yet.
we don't know.
We have to see what the electrical.
We shouldn't rely on that one way or the other because that's,
Oh, okay.
that's a side goal, but I don't know that really affects a decision
Okay.
we would be doing.
No, wouldn't.
If the home was remaining and they were asking to build an addition, and then it might change some answers to questions for the better or for the worse, we don't know. But the fact that they're removing the home.
Just to give you perspective, if I can speak real quick, we've had 7 people try to remove that home. And it had to be either cut the second floor off, take off the roof. The electric company, I spoke to them the other day. They said unless you cut that top floor off, they cannot get it under the wires. So everybody who's been interested, now we're down to 2 people. And, it's expensive what they want to do. And I don't know if it's, but we're giving them the house for free. If they can move it and get it through the electric company without taking out down stop signs along the way, great. And they are working really hard to do it. But it would compromise the house after they move it because the electrical wire
What
situation.
it cost to move a house?
Well, yeah, so
Not cheap.
we're gonna talk about that. We're as staff with,
Yeah, we're meeting with
we're
them.
meeting with that, but just as a quick note there is that we have a policy in place that if houses are a certain height, we can't move them because it requires disconnecting electricity to all, a bunch of different homes and moving wires. And so then you're now stopping electric going to homes and businesses to move a house. So that's why we have a height requirement for that. So, council could always change that policy or grant an exception, but right now, that's what we're gonna be talking about, whether or not that's feasible.
Okay, so we've decided that the practical difficulty was not self-created.
The lot size and shape is dictated by the presence of the bluff.
Okay,
Exactly.
and that's what you want to use as the specific evidence? Yes. Sounds good to me.
That's my first stab at it.
I believe it's accurate.
Okay,
So that I believe concludes the review of the findings of fact, and based on that findings of fact, someone could choose to start a motion.
I move that we allow the variance to go through.
I'll second that.
all in favor?
I,
Aye. Maddie?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous? And the practical difficulty you want to remove?
Oh, the practical difficulty was created by the size and shape of the lot was created by the bluff, by the presence of the bluff.
Got it?
Yep. Normal lot, and this lot didn't get its fair share because the bluff was there. I don't know how those things are usually written, but.
You're doing fine.
Well, I think with the language that we had from the findings of fact, we can draft something up.
You have what you
Put it in
need.
the minute, yeah. And we had a motion based on the information determined in the findings of facts. Yeah, so that's that, unless anybody else has any, well, Bob, the meeting's.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
We really appreciate it.
Once again, Dan, thanks for.
Yeah, thanks for making the effort to fit it in better. That makes a lot of
It
difference.
makes things easier.
Yeah.
You're welcome. And it was an easy property as well. Yeah.
And maybe
We're moving on to the next.
Okay, let's go to the next.
comments.
Any member comments or anything before?
Nothing to add to what we talked about.
the copies, do they keep those?
Okay.
Does it?
Great.
Motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Got it?
Done.
All in favor? Done.
Thank you.
Good luck. At this time, I haven't received any further applications